Hey everyone, this is Matt, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about hand traps primarily. I'll also touch upon side deck cards, especially side deck cards that I think that you should be running in your side deck for the current format. So, the recent new ban list just went live. You know, we're at Skill Drain at 3. We have a new format coming up, right? The Adventure Token is out. It's everywhere, right? So, no, knowing what should you be side decking is always good, but also it's important to um, and the reason I want to talk about hand traps is because I do get a lot of questions and comments on my videos and like in other places, Discord, etc., where people ask me, "Oh, why don't you run hand traps in like your deck profiles?" Like if you watch my deck profiles, they're mostly devoid of hand traps. You don't see very many, and especially my main deck, right? Like, and people ask, "Oh, how can you possibly play modern day Yu-Gi-Oh without hand traps?" I'll explain my reasoning behind that. Um, and why I think like hand traps are a little overrated in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, and why I think like you know you're not like you got to be a little smarter about building your deck and not just run a hand trap just because someone else is running a hand trap or just because oh like this is just the hand trap that you're supposed to run or like that you oh other people are running this hand trap therefore I have to like not necessarily I don't think so let's get into that. So let's first talk about side decking. Actually, no, let's go into hand traps first. I'll talk about side decking later. So hand traps. So the most common hand trap in the universe and most popular, most seen everywhere in the main deck. If you go to any of the YouTube video where there's a deck profile, there's a deck list, something is being showcased like a deck, you will see this hand trap in its Ash Blossom Joyous Spring, right? It's really hard to like not to find a video or deck profile where this isn't a primary hand trap, right? Um, and in fact, I would say the top three main deck hand traps nowadays in the current formats that you see are probably Ash, Valor, and Imperm, right? And it's funny because it didn't really used to be this way. If you go back, I mean, I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh, or I got back into Yu-Gi-Oh in 2021, right? I didn't start playing until the Dino Dragon Link format around July 2021. And when I came in, Valor and Imperm were seldom played. Like the biggest hand trap was Ash, and I almost never ran into these. Well, how do I know that? Well, I played Dark Magician, like because I can recall how many times my Verde Anaconda got Valor Impermed and how many times my Red Eyes Fusion got Ash. Like, it used to be the case that back in the Dino and Dragon Link format, um, for good reason too. Uh, like you didn't see these, right? So it was very, very easy for Anaconda to resolve. Whereas playing Red Eyes Fusion was more of a risk. Nowadays, playing Red Eyes Fusion is less of a risk because of Ash, right? And actually, Anaconda is even more risky because of cards like Forbidden Chalice, Forbidden Droplet, right? Like just cards with generic monster negate effects that are just like everywhere. So these are three most common hand trap. Um, and so why don't I run any of these? Well, the reason I don't run these cards is because I feel like these cards are a little underwhelming, let's say. Of course, it depends on your matchup, right? Like there are definitely some games where a single usage of one of these cards, like depending on the matchup, will just end your opponent's turn immediately, or like just end the game, right? And I feel like Ash is probably, even though it's the most popular hand trap, it's the most, let's say, useless one. It's the one with the least impact. Like nowadays, the biggest thing that Ash can do is stop Fusion Destiny, right? Like, can you really think of anything else in like, um, modern meta where an Ash is more impact than stopping Fusion Destiny? Like, other than stopping Fusion Destiny, what exactly is Ash doing? Like, like, how is Ash gonna stop like an adventure, um, like Phantom Knights combo, right? Like Ash used to be amazing during Prank Kids because you Ash the first Prank Kid graveyard effect and their turn is over, right? But now that Prank Kids have access to the Brave token, you can't even necessarily do that anymore, right? Or even like like a lot of Prank Kids players learned how to chain block, right? Like via Parallel Exceed or like other methods, right? Where Ash is kind of nullified. So like I don't know. I like to put cards in my deck that have high impact value, right? Because it's an opportunity card cost, right? You have a 40 card deck, you only pick 40 cards, right? Out of the entire 11,000 plus cards in Yu-Gi-Oh that exist, right? Some of them are multiple copies, right? Like some of them are deck core, so you know maybe you have like 15 to 20 slots to actually work with that are not part of like your deck's main engine. And when I think about, oh, do I want to make one, two, or three of those slots Ash Blossom? I never really feel like I do. Then again, please keep in mind the context. I am not a combo player. I don't really play combo decks. I play control decks, right? So maybe you'll say, oh, of course he doesn't play hand traps, like, or he doesn't play Ash because he plays control decks. I mean, there are plenty of other Dark Magician deck profiles you can go look up on YouTube that run Ash, right? I don't. Um, I've been to locals. I've been to a number of like live events where I've seen Eldritch players running Ash, and I'm just like, why are you running Ash? There's no point to run Ash in an Eldritch deck. Again, people do it compulsively, and that's part of the problem with like um, hand traps is like they take away like creativity, thought process, and nuance in deck building, right? Um, yeah, Ash was amazing back in the meta. You know, when the adventure token wasn't around and like Prank Kids was like near the top, right? Like this, you know, Ash can single-handedly end the turn of a Prank Kids player, right? For example, um, didn't do it with Dinos, like didn't do it with Dragon Link, but you know, Prank Kids highly susceptible to lose, you know, getting completely shut down by Ash, right? Um, so you know, and I see this all the time. Every time I see people play, whenever I play against decks where I see people playing Ash, most of the time is one thing I've noticed is that they don't know how to play it, like, or they just choose Ash at the worst possible um, moments, like you can imagine, right? Like almost every deck that you play against, there's an optimal point where Ash will have the most impact. Now that impact might not be grand, you know, might not be significant in the grand scheme of things, but for every deck there is a point where Ash is the best. It's the best time to use Ash. And almost every time I see Ash used, it's in the like it's not in that optimal point, right? So that, like even if you know what their deck is, you still um, choose to Ash at the wrong time, right? Um, like I'll give you an example. Like I was playing Master Duel last night. I was playing my Eldritch deck, and I was against I think it was a virtual world player. I forget exactly. Maybe it was Burn Up, whatever, some degenerate combo deck. They had Ash in their deck, right? And they knew that I had an Eldritch deck. They knew 100% because they saw my cards, right? They saw I had Conquistador. They saw that I banished Conquistador from my graveyard and I set Elixir on the field. On my following turn, I used Pot of Extravagance, right? I banished 6 random cards from extra deck to attempt to draw 2, and then they ashed me, right? And I'm just like thinking, why would you ever do that? Like, you know that I have Elixir of Scarlet Sanguine face down. You know that it summons Eldritch from the deck. Why would you ash my pot and not my Elixir, right? Like my entire engine depends upon having Eldritch on the in rotation so that I can like recycle the traps and whatever. Like so, and I see this a lot. People who like to shotgun Ash, just like the very first chance they get, and usually it's a bad idea. Almost never, no good ever comes of it. Like the biggest time I see this is like, you know, your opponent starts their turn. Maybe they have 5 cards, maybe they have 6 cards in hand, whatever. They went first or second. The very first play they do, and this is almost always true, is they play a pot card. Maybe it's Pot of Duality, maybe it's Pot of Extravagance, maybe it's Pot of Prosperity, whatever. They play some pot card, right? Why? Because, well, first of all, Pot of Extravagance you have to play as your first action on main phase 2, but like it's never a bad idea to open, pot of Desires as your first play, pot of whatever, because you want to see like more cards. Obviously, you want to see all the options you'll have in your hand, but also you want to bait Ash. Like pot cards are Ash bait. Like they're like whenever I'm play Subterror, I run Pot of Duality, I run Pot of Prosperity in my Subterror deck. I always play Pot of Prosperity first, even if I have my full combo in my hand. Why? Just because I want to bait their Ash, right? Like in my Subterror deck, I play 3 Red Eyes Fusion. I want to play Red Eyes Fusion and not get ashed, right? So one of the easiest ways to do that is like, oh, play Pot of Prosperity. I'll banish, 3 or 6 or whatever, and then they ash me. I'm like, oh, cool, Red Eyes Fusion, right? So again, terrible use of Ash. And I see this all the time. It's so common to see people using Ash poorly. And the thing is, like, if you're gonna be that dumb and like that unaware, why even play Ash in the first place? Just because some YouTuber told you to play Ash, right? Like you're not actually thinking, right? So not only are you not thinking in deck building, you're thinking, okay, is this a format right now where Ash has high impact? And the answer is no. We're in a meta with what are the best decks? Invoke DPE, Adventure, Prank Kids, Adventure, Phantom Knights. I don't even know if Sky Striker is still relevant. I'm sure they'll still be around. Like Sword Soul, right? Like Ash is not stopping any of those decks. It's not ending any of their turns. Um, like if you hold it for Fusion Destiny, you say, oh great, so now they have to go into Anaconda to get their DPE, like right? They'll get the same boss monster, but with a couple more steps, right? So again, not a high impact card, and yet I continue to see Ash blossom in main decks, and it just boggles my mind. I don't understand why, right? Um, like if you're playing a rogue deck, maybe this can be a turn ender. Like you're against Madolche, they summon Angeli, tribute Angeli to summon, to get a monster, and then you ash that, right, and then their turn is over. Maybe, right, or maybe they have like Madolche Salon. Like like that's the thing. It's best against rogue decks and not great, at least right now in the current format, against meta decks. So when you're deck building, regardless of what deck you play, if you don't like control decks, if you like your combo decks, fine. You can run Ash, but really, really think about it. If there is not a better card you could be putting in your main deck instead of Ash Blossom. Because I think there are. Like, look at how many hand traps I have here. I took out a bunch of hand traps to use as examples. Like, and there's more. Like, these are just like the most common ones. And really think, is Ash really better than all of these hand traps, right? Really think about that. And even go further than that. Is Ash better than like just a regular trap or a spell, right? Like, um, so when deck building, please use your brain. Don't just mindlessly copy someone's build that has Ash just because they're on YouTube, right? And just like and similarly, if you do choose to run Ash, actually know how to use Ash in game. Please do not Ash their pot of prosperity. It's like best case you're trading a 1-for-1 there. Like you ash pot of desires, or they banish 10 cards in the deck and they get nothing out of it. Like yeah, okay. I mean, but they probably still have full combo in their hand, right? So what does it matter? Um, and especially, and let me tell you a little trick, because when I came back into Yu-Gi-Oh, I didn't know much about the metagame. I didn't know much about what was going on. Like I was a noob, right? Like early 2021. I used to run Ash in all my decks. Why? Because everyone on YouTube was running Ash in their decks, so I figured I should run Ash on my decks. I used to run Ash and Dark Magician. Great. So I did learn a lot of these lessons like the hard way, right? Like I did Ash, like first turn, first play pots, always a disaster, right? And I've also like ashed into gammas, right? I don't know if y'all recall, but this card here exists. This card here allows you to negate the activation of a monster effect and destroy it, but if you have no monsters on your field, right? So consider this possibility. Like your opponent uses Pot of Extravagance or Pot of Desire. Like let's say whatever, some pot. Now let's draw 2 pot. Let's say for the sake of argument, right? They pay cost. You chain Ash, right? Like this is their first play of the game. They have nothing on the field, and then they chain Gamma, right? Or I guess this way, right? So now, not only is your Ash negated, right? So this card becomes completely useless, right? Like that's 1 out of your 5 cards in your hand is gone, like thrown away. But they get to get Gamma on the field with Driver, right? Which they could then use to synchro into Omega, and then Omega can rip another card out of your hand. And now their pot card goes through. They get their draw, right, or their Excavator, whatever. They get Omega. They rip another card out of your hand, and and maybe they don't even go to Omega. Maybe they just like link into something else. But whatever. The point is, because you're like you have to be really smart. You should, because you know that this card exists and is very popular, and it's in a lot of decks. Like a lot of deck profiles, like definitely love to run Gamma. Always hold your hand traps. I mean, in this case, the example I'm using is Ash, but this can really apply for anyone. When you know they have no monsters on the field, okay? Like, just why? So, to run PSY Gamma, and let's say you run 3 of these, you have to run a brick, which is PSY Driver, right? And so, to run 3 cards, you run a 4th brick. All 4 of those cards will become bricks if you always Ash or do whatever hand trap when they already have a monster on the field. So would you rather them get two free bodies, rip 1 to 2 cards out of your hand, right? And then like go into the rest of their combo plays, Or would you rather transform like three of the cards in their deck into bricks? What would you rather do, right? Like you want their deck to be as bricky as possible. So don't give them the opportunity to gamma, which is why you see someone playing a pot, their very first play, they want you to ash, right? Because they probably have their full combo. You don't know, right? So if you don't know, you have to assume that they do. Worst case scenario, they have their full combo, right? Like let's say their hand is all bricks and a pot. You don't know that, right? Then you can get lucky and ash and their turn is over. Maybe the game is over. But let's say the pot draws them cards. There's no guarantee the cards will fix their hand. And even if they do, like let's say they draw one good card, like is that really going to fix like four or five other bricks? I doubt it, right? Their board is going to be a lot weaker. And guess what? You still have your ash to stop one of their plays anyway. So it's not a good trade. If you're playing ash in your deck, please, please, please do not ash pot cards. 95% of the card of the time when you ash a pot card, it's a waste of ash, right? Notice I said 95%. What about the 5% of the time? Well, if you know that if you know what their deck is, and you know that there's no other card in their deck that you can ash, like let's say you're against Altergeist, right? So against Altergeist, you have two ash. I think you only have two ash options. You have Pot of Extravagance and Multi-Faker, because Multi-Faker summons a monster from the. So I personally would prefer to ash Multi-Faker, but like maybe there you can reason, oh, you should ash Extravagance because like what else are you gonna ash, right? Like if you know their deck and you know there's nothing else to ash other than the pot card, yeah, then go ahead and do it, right? Another scenario, like let's say this is like 4, 5, 10 turns into the game. Your opponent has no cards in their hand. They top deck and they top deck a pot card. Then yeah, ash it because it's the only card they have, right? Like, yeah. So use some common sense. You use your brain a little bit, because the number of times and I ran into this too when I used to run ash and I would run headfirst into gamma. Yeah, it felt bad. It felt terrible. Like it's like insta scoop, right? So just keep that in mind. Like if you're gonna play hand trap, make sure it's the right hand trap. And if you do play it, actually know how to play it, right? Don't just shotgun it first chance you get, because that's how you lose, right? And then you're just like, well, why did you even bother getting this card? Like this could have been a Raigeki, right? Like I think about this one. Let's say people say, oh, hand traps are going second. Okay, well let me ask you this: every time you run ash and you're going second and your turn starts, ask yourself, would I rather this be a Raigeki? For example, like I'm just saying Raigeki is an example. Like look at their board and ask yourself, oh, or let's say you already use your ash. Like, oh, would you have rather the ash been a Raigeki or been the ash? You see what I'm saying? Like most of the time, there's a better card for your deck than this card. Like ash is one of those cards where it's like I have no clue how to deck build. I don't really know what else to put in here. I'm just gonna put an ash just because it's like a generically good card. And yeah, ash is generically good. I'm not gonna argue with that. Like, it can stop a really big play. Can keyword on can, right? But it's just like, it just feel like there's just better cards that you can be using, and most of the time that I've seen people use it, even at tournaments, they're using it wrong. Or they like run headfirst into a gamma or whatever, or maybe the opponent puts up Appaloosa, right, and then like all your hand traps are dead. So yeah, just wanted to say that. Like obviously, I say, oh, don't ash if like they have no monsters because then they can gamma. Obviously, there's some exceptions. If they Fusion Destiny or Red Eyes Fusion, which is a huge high impact card, right? It's very game changing if Fusion Destiny or Red Eyes Fusion goes through. Then yeah, ash them. Obviously, you're risking them having gamma or like whatever, even Called by the Grave like can stop ash, right? But like at that point, right, it's worth the risk of ashing like the Red Eyes Fusion or Fusion Destiny because of how high impact it is, right? Like if you ash Red Eyes Fusion successfully, their turn is over potentially, right? Or like Fusion Destiny, their turn might not be over, but like they'll have to do a bit more legwork to get to their boss monster, right? So yeah, keep that in mind. Now. Yeah, so there's a lot of generic hand traps. They come and go based on the meta, right? Now, if you were to ask me, okay, but I like your Dark Magician decks. I'm not a fan of running all those traps. I want to run hand traps in the Dark Magician deck, right? What hand trap should I run? If I personally were to run hand traps in my Dark Magician deck, the hand traps I would main right now would be Valor Imperm. And if I wanted space for one more, I would run Drone Lockbird. If you were to ask me, all right, you need main deck some hand traps. What would you main deck? These three. All right, what about a fourth hand trap? Then probably DD Crow. So again, I'm not going with Ash because, in my opinion, there's just better cards that you can go with than Ash. And you might think, okay, well, what about these cards made you pick them? Well, Valor Imperm is just really, really good right now, and any card effects that like negate monsters are just good, right? Like generic monster negates. Sword Soul is still a powerful matchup, right? They're not. They lost Protoss, they lost Imperial Warrior, they lost two Pots of Desire, but they're still a decent deck, right? These cards are great against them. Ash does nothing to them. Like most of these other, like DD Crow does nothing to Sword Soul. Nibiru only hits Sword Soul if they're like super greedy or like super, you know, uh, like overextended or whatever. But yeah, Sword Soul, like these cards hit. Obviously, invoke decks if you're able to stop the Alistair. Maybe they won't already have the invocation in hand. Like these are like the two generic good hand traps. Uh, Imperm, I think, is better than Valor personally because you cannot call by the grave. You can call by the grave. They can call by the grave on Valor. They cannot call by the grave Imperm. And obviously, Imperm is an actual trap card. So if you don't use it, you can set it and then like potentially get a monster negate and a column negate. So you get like a 2-for-1 potentially. So yeah, these are definitely the best. And one thing people don't realize is like Effect Veiler is a spellcaster. So if you have a Dark Magician deck, um, Secrets of Dark Magic can fuse Effect Veiler with Dark Magician Go to make the Dark Magicians, for example. Or like there's also a tuner, right? If you have Crystron Halki Fabrax, two cards can get 2 access code if you have Effect Veiler, right? I mean, you have enough spellcasters to revive with Selene, but just in case it's like the first turn of the game and you don't have any spellcasters, for whatever reason, like you can go from Halk all the way to access code if you have Effect Filler. So that's pretty good. It's a tuner, right? I mean, we don't make synchro plays, but like think about a Buster Blader deck. Buster Blader decks love level 1 tuners, like Red Blue Eyes decks do too, right? So I think a Dark Magician deck you should run these two. They hit Sword Soul, they hit it hits what's called what's that, invoked, right? It's like they're not game ending, right? Like or turn ending. Like yeah, if you negate their Moye, they might not have like long gun as a follow up, and they'll end their turn with no synchro monsters or whatever, right? Like it can be game ending. Doesn't mean it is, but I definitely feel like both these cards, especially in this format, are way higher impact than Ash can ever hope to be, right? Um, so yeah, it's all about high impact. What will actually make a big difference in the game? Not like you don't want hand traps to be a minor inconvenience to your opponent. You want it to be turn ending or game ending, right? Like because otherwise it's like, well, why are you spending a like one card from your hand if they're going to put up their full board anyway? Like yeah, it's just silly. Yeah, and I mentioned Drone Lockbird is really good. Drone Lockbird is one of those really high impact cards that can end players' turns. You play against Dragonlink, Drone Lockbird can end their turn. You play against Drytron, Drone Lockbird ends their turn. Granted, Drytron got banned, ban listed into Oblivion, so probably won't come up again. But like, there's plenty of cards that like rely on decks that rely on a lot of searching, where this just completely shuts them down. So Fluanderies, right? Way better to run Droll than Ash against Fluanderies. Um, yeah, because this is like an ongoing effect for the whole turn where they just can't add cards to their hand. So, and another thing about this card is like, this is also a spellcaster. So if you're playing Dark Magician, you have Secrets of Dark Magic. This can fuse into the Dark Magicians. I mean, either of these cards can go in Anaconda, and since they're level 1s, they can go to Link Reboot. They can go to Relinquish Anima, right? Like you can make more like plays on your turn other than using these as for their intended hand trap effect, right? So just keep that in mind. And then I mentioned DD Crow. Why DD Crow is a level 1 dark monster. It can avoid goes and match. You can link this into Link Rebo or Wingless Anima. But the main thing why I think if I were to put in the current format DD Crow in is because DD Crow can take out DPE. DPE's in the graveyard, take them out. It can take out if you're playing against Sky Striker. If it engages in their graveyard, take it out. Right, like this can be very high impact. Or like if they don't have engage, they have like Sky Striker Ray, just take it out, right? And then they can't recycle Ray and all that. So yeah, so I like these personally. Like if I were to main deck these two. Oh, you might say, oh, what about a third? This one? What about a fourth? This one? What about a fifth? At that point, I don't think you have room for any more hand traps. But I suppose if you really needed to um, main deck a fifth, I'll go Nibiru. But uh, yeah, I'm gonna talk about Nibiru in a bit. But yeah, so I think for the current format, these hand traps are still good. Ash, not so much. Um, frame like Gamma is always good, right? It's hard for Gamma to be bad. But I would say in terms of hand traps that have higher impact in the current meta, I think that the Ghost Ogre is really good in the current format. This can stop the Brave engine, or I guess the Adventure engine, right? Um, Lancia. So these are a bit more side decky. Like these are more main deck options, and actually Droll, DD Crow and Droll are great side decks. Like so, these are great main decks. These are great side decks, but they can be main decks. Um, yeah. Normally, I would say great high impact hand traps are for this format. Nibiru, Lancia. Nibiru can just end someone's turn. Like they do their full combo. They put all these monsters out. If they don't like you drop this on them before they get their first monster again, maybe before they get their Appaloosa, and it just ends their turn. Like they're completely obliterated, right? Like it's like this is a blowout card. I love Nibiru. I think I like ever since the beginning. I have always liked this hand trap, and I've almost always side decked this hand trap until recently, and I'll explain why in a bit. But yeah, so but in the current format, I would actually not side Nibiru, and instead I would side deck Token Collector. So I think we're in a meta where Token Collector is really good. So obviously Token Collector is already good against Sword Soul, right? Like you just this summons to the field, sucks up all their tokens. They can't summon tokens. Sword Soul engine dead. I mean they can still play through it. Like if they go into their 10 years, it is obviously suboptimal. They can bounce this back with Vishuda, and then they can go into their tokens play. But yeah, this card is very good against tokens, especially now that we have the adventure token. This card, in my opinion, should be requirement for side deck option. Like if you're against a deck that has the adventure token, or even if you're against Sword Soul, this should go into your main deck when you're siding. Like this card is amazing. Like it'll kill the adventure engine. Um, so all right, so let's get back into high impact hand traps and why I think a card like Nibiru, even though I like it, and even though it's usually good, I don't think it's good right now. So obviously Nibiru can be stopped by a monster negate. So if you're against Drytron, they put out their Herald. Uh, Nibiru's not going to do anything anymore. So usually you want to drop Nibiru right before they have their first monster negate, right? So if you see they have 4 monsters that can go into Appaloosa, maybe it's time to drop Nibiru. If you see that they summon Borreload Savage Dragon, recall Borreload Savage Dragon has an Omni negate, but it's an activated effect. So when they summon Borreload, they have to activate its effect to attach a Link monster and then gain tokens, right? So what you would do is if you're against Dragon Link or a deck that uses Borreload Savage, they summon Borreload Savage Dragon, they activate its on summon effect, and then you chain Nibiru. And then Nibiru will wipe their board, and then Borreload is gone, and they won't be able to negate it. So Nibiru is great. Obviously against Sword Soul, if they put up their Barone, Barone has an Omni Negate, can stop this, right? Obviously, like good players will know how to play around Nibiru, but still, Nibiru has always been like in my opinion, quintessential high impact hand trap. And until recently, 3 Nibirus were always in my side deck, always, always, always in my side deck. Now, why is it not anymore? Well, because of the new adventure engine. Thanks to the adventure engine, decks that usually got killed by Nibiru in the past, Phantom Knights, Prank Kids, etc. They can now summon the adventure token with the Griffin, and the Griffin has a Omni Negate. And as soon as that Omni Negate is up, Nibiru is dead in the water. It's not going to do anything anymore. So that's why I think Nibiru should go out and Token Collector should go in. Like obviously, if you're not sure about side deck or you want to put more than one hand trap, yeah, you can have Nibiru and Token Collector, but then you'd have to you'd have to draw both of them, right? I don't like hand traps or situations where I need two side deck cards in order to do anything, right? Like it's like, oh, Nibiru is good only if I also draw this, or Nibiru is good only if I also draw Imperm. I don't like that. I'd rather like if Nibiru is not good by itself, just don't run it, right? Because again, you're opening 5 cards in your hand, uh, going second, going first, whatever. Like maybe you'll get a 6 card if you're going second, but like you want those cards that you side deck to be good by themselves. You don't want them to be like dependently good. Like, oh, it's only good with Imperm. It's only good with token collectors. So right now, because of the current format and the advent of the adventure tokens, I think Nibiru should come out, and token collector is your new friend now. Um, my friendship with Nibiru has ended. Now token collector and I are best buds. All right. And then the other 2 cards I want to touch on, Lancia and Ghost Ogre. Lancia is a high impact hand trap against Phantom Knights. They can't do their full combo, right? You like you activate this like beginning of a Phantom Knight's turn, they're dead, they're done, right? Like they can't do much. If you're against Sword Soul, this can shut off their 10E engine, like they can't just shoot at you under Lancia. So yeah, there are, it's very situational, right? Like that's why I said this could probably be a side deck and not a main deck, right? And then Ghost Ogre is all the rave as well because Ghost Ogre can pop. It's good. It's decent against Sword Soul. Like they Moye, right? They'll get their token, but they'll lose their Moye. So like they still need another body to synchro. So and when the token's on the field, they can only synchro. They can't link. They can't do anything else, right? This is also good against like the Brave uh, engine, right? The continuous spell or whatever, Fateful Adventure. You can pop it with Ghost Ogre. There's multiple applications for Ghost Ogre. Like it's a good card like in the current format, especially now that E-Telly exists, because Ghost Ogre is a tuner, level 3, and E-Telly brings her to the field, and her effect actually doesn't require her to be in the hand, even though she's a hand trap. Can be on the field and activate it, right? So yeah, again, you have to read the format. You have to understand how the game is being played when you make decisions about hand traps. Most of the time, my view, because of the types of decks that I play control to borderline control mid range decks. I think most of your hand traps, in my opinion, should be in your side deck, and only the high impact ones. So right now, uh, in the iteration of my Dark Magician deck that I'm testing, um, the only hand trap I have is Token Collector in the side because it's such a good high impact card like right now. Kills Sword Soul, shuts off Adventure token. It's really good. So, all right, and I also want to talk about um, 2 more hand traps. These 2 are actually some of my favorite hand traps. If you want to know what my personal favorite hand traps are, it's these 3 right here. Generically good hand traps, right? Like I will always love these cards, even if they're not good in the meta. Like so, Nibiru is not good in the meta, but I love Nibiru. All right. Dimension Shifter is my favorite hand trap. I main deck it in Subterror. Like only some rogue decks can main deck it. Definitely cannot run in Dark Magician. But let's say you're playing Madolche deck, you should be running 3 Dimension Shifter. Let's say you're playing Grand Magi, you should be running 3 Dimension Shifter. Let's say you're playing Fluanderies, you should be running 3 Dimension Shifter. Like this card will end turns immediately. Like if you lose a die roll, oh your opponent says, oh you're going second. Actually, I'm going first. Like they're not going to play through Dimension Shifter, and if they do, they're like kneecapping themselves. I remember playing against a Drytron player who tried to play through Dimension Shifter, and it was like the saddest thing I've ever seen. Like they banished their Gamma, they banished their Ben 10, they banished everything. They banished their ritual spell. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? End your turn, right? Like if they don't end their turn, they're kneecapping themselves. Like yeah, this is a card similar to Maxi where and I would actually say it's higher impact than Maxi, uh, because like it guarantees that their turn will end, or that some important cards of theirs will get banished, depending on. So yeah, I love Dimension Shifter. Unfortunately, cannot run in Dark Magician, but now that Flanders is getting some power in Battle of Chaos, I think I will be building a Flanders deck, and this will absolutely be a 3 of in the main deck. Um, Obviously, like if this is active and they have DPE, DPE leaves the field, gets banished, not the graveyard, and you'll never see it again. And then of course, one of my other favorite hand traps is Ghost Ogre and Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries. So this is like an OG, like you only run this if you have an extra deck that you don't know what to do with, or like you don't need your extra deck. So I used to run this in my Subterra deck. Although now that with the new format, I'm actually running Super Poly now in my Subterra deck. So instead of so I used to have an extra deck full of Winter Cherries targets. Now I have a side deck full of Super Poly targets. But yeah, whatever. This is hilarious because like you just have a bunch of boss monsters in your extra deck that you expect to see, like DPE or whatever, Barone, Crystal Wing, etc. And then like whenever they're about to summon it, you just drop this and then banish all copies of it. I remember I was at a locals. This is very funny. I got top 4 of these locals. This is a few months back. I think it was November or whatever. I was playing Subterra at the time. I was playing against an invoked player, invoked DPE. He goes through his Alistair stuff, right? He summons Alistair, links Alistair away into Almirage, links Almirage away to Secure Garda, and then plays Invocation, right? So Invocation, as some of you will know, in that scenario, will almost like 9 times out of 10 summon invoke Mechaba, right? Yeah, so as soon as he played Invocation, I chained Winter Cherries. I showed him, hey, I have a Mechaba in my extra deck, and then they had to banish all the Mechabas from their extra deck. So, since this resolves first before the Invocation, they lost all their Mechabas, and now they're forced, like, to summon something else. So, because they have Secure Gardener, maybe they'll summon El Shell Construct. Because they have the Almirage in the grave, maybe they'll summon Purgatory. But the point is, they're not summoning Mechaba, right? One of their biggest boss monsters. Like, Invoke DPE, their boss monsters are Mechaba DPE. That's it. If you deal with Mechaba, all they have is DPE. Yeah, like their Dogmatica package and like their Shadal Construct is not going to carry the game, right? And if you run 3 of these in your deck, like on one turn you banish all their Mechabas, on the next turn maybe you banish your DPE or you banish like Entis, right? Actually, it was funny because in a different game against Invoked, I it was their turn. They went Ecclesian to Maximus. They activated Maximus effect. I chained Winter Cherries and I showed them Entis in my extra deck, which forces them to banish all their Entis. So then they have no Entis to send to the graveyard, so they have to do their Aquilon, whatever, something else. But then I send my Entis, and then I get my pops, right? Like it's just really fun. This is really funny to use. Unfortunately, this doesn't really hit Sword Soul, because of their Tenny engine. Sword Soul can recycle worms from their banish pile, but like I had Barone in my extra, like they can't recycle Barone, so like you can take out their Barone, right? Like with Winter Cherries, like they never have to deal with Barone again, for example. So I like Winter Cherries, very meta dependent, and obviously depends a lot on what deck you play. Dark Magician, I can't run it because I need my extra deck. Eldritch, technically I don't need it, but I don't need my extra deck, but I do like to have my extra deck, especially since I have like Extravagant. I run Extravagance, right? But yeah, this is a card to always keep an eye out for. And if you're playing Flaunderies next format, you don't need your extra deck. Run this, right? Put a bunch of extra deck boss monsters in there, and then just take them out whenever you need to. Yeah, so that's what I mean by high impact hand trap. If you can run these high impact hand traps, do it, right? Yeah, because otherwise it's like, okay, yeah, these hand traps can be high impact depending on when you play it. Like the format specific ones, and then of course there's like the generic ones. It's like, yeah, Ghost Ogre will still, or Ghost Bell will still be okay, but like, we're not in the pure tri brigade meta anymore, or maybe we will be soon. So this was like great against Revolt, right? So again, use your brain is all I'm saying. Don't just have a hand trap named Ash just because you saw someone on YouTube have it. Like, think about the format. Think about when you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh, right? And one more thing I wanted to comment about hand traps, and this is interesting, about like high impact, right? So I'm just gonna use an example. Let's take DD Crow, right? So you want to run DD Crow in your deck, because maybe they have DP, maybe they have Ray, like whatever. You want to take out an important monster from their graveyard, so they can't use it anymore, right? Hypothetically, let's compare DD Crow to Ice Dragon's Prison, right? So personally, in my Dark Magician deck, I would right now prefer to run, and this is also true in Eldritch, right? I prefer to run Ice Dragon's Prison over DD Crow, personally. Now, what are the trade-offs? So obviously, people say, oh, hand traps are faster, right? You don't have to set them and they can be used on any turn. Yeah, so you do have the versatility of that, right? Like this can be used any time to take out a monster. And like if you're against an Eldritch player, like yeah, you DD Crow their Eldritch, they might be screwed, right? So yeah, this is a fine card. There's nothing wrong with DD Crow, but I prefer to have cards that are slightly higher impact. So I would prefer to run Ice Dragon's Prison. So I'm currently running this, maining 3 in my Eldritch. I'm trying to side 2 of these in my Dark Magician deck because this can also take out DPE, right? So this can take out DPE, this can take out DPE and Celestial, so they don't get a draw 2, right? But also, let's say they're not playing DPE. Uh, let's say you're against a Sword Soul player. What's going to be higher impact against Sword Soul, DD Crow or Ice Dragon's Prison, right? Let's say they have their Changing on the field. I don't know if you know, but the Changing is that really annoying level 10 synchro that like it's hard to destroy because they just banish cards instead, right? Like DD Crow's not going to do anything against that, but you can absolutely just like, take out their Taya or whatever from the graveyard, banish that, and they're changing, right? So I think this card is more useful in more situations, personally, right? Like if you think about things that happen, like obviously it's slower, right? Like if you're going second, you're not going to play this for like until turn 3 at the very least, right? Like third turn of the game, right? Whereas you can play this on turn 1 going first or second. But VP might not even be in the graveyard, so who cares? Like on this first turn, so who cares, right? So yeah, higher impact is what I'm saying. And for a lot of these hand traps, like I think like is there a trap or a spell or another card that I think will be more useful or have a higher impact on the game than this current hand trap, right? Oftentimes no. It's hard to find a replacement for like Nibiru, right? Though maybe you can argue, like, oh, summon limit is like if you're going first, like, oh, summon limit is like better than the mirror, right? Like whatever. Like the point is that you always have to be making these analyses, right? Like these are like important decision making things, right? Um, so yeah, this is just one example, right? I'm not saying it's the only one, but in this case, I'm just explaining why would I rather run Ice Dragon's Prison over DD Crow, right? Plus, with like Ice Dragon's Prison, it's more versatile too. Like, let's say there's nothing to banish, I can just use this to revive one of their beaters, like a 3K beater, 2500 beater from their graveyard, and attack for game, right? Or like attack over their monster. I just feel like this is way more versatile and useful than this card is. Even though, yeah, this card can be very niche. Like oh, banish their Sky Striker Engage, and like they're dead in the water, or like. Yeah, like you can't banish Sky Striker Engage with Ice Dragons, but you can banish DPE, you can banish Ray, right? So yeah, just keep that in mind when making decisions like these. Again, I'm not knocking hand traps. It's perfectly fine to run them. Just make sure that there isn't a better card for your deck or for the current format. Um, all right, so I think that's all I'm going to talk about for hand traps. I think I've made my points. But yeah, one thing I want to talk about is side decking for the current format. So I've already told you about what cards I think are good in the current format. I think hand traps wise, these cards are great. I would say Ash and Nibiru, Ghost Spell. So these cards are generically good in the current format. These cards, like obviously these two depends on your deck, right? Like we'll take out Ash Dragons. Phantasme and Ghost Spell I don't think are so good in the current format. I think Nibiru Ash are very weak in the current format. Would not recommend, but like if you're thinking about, oh, how do I build my deck, main deck or side deck, like look into these options if you really want hand traps, right? Now, in terms of my recommendation of what you should side deck specifically for this format, in my opinion, your side decking should consist of, and granted, you can make modifications, evenly matched 3 of these, 3 of these, Dark Ruler No More, 3 of these, Cosmic Cyclone, 3 of these, Token Collector, and then the final 3 you can do whatever you want. Like if you want, you can do I don't know, Drolls. Maybe you want to do DD Crows. Maybe you want to do Lancias. Like the slot's up to you. But I think the best form of back row removal are still these two. Like it was true in the last format. I think it's still true now. This is just like a generically good blowout card. Just blows out their board, right? Assuming they don't negate it. Are you having trouble against Artifact Scythe, locking out your extra deck? This card will save you, right? This card can be game winning in that situation, right? Like I think it's more important right now to banish cards from back row not destroy them. I think destroying, like, there's too much protection against destroying. There's like Starlight Road, there's Waking the Dragon, there's like the Lord of the Heavenly Prison. Like if you're against an Eldritch player, you want to banish their stuff, not destroy them, because they have like way more counters to card destruction effects than banish effects. Dark World No More. I say that this is an essential side deck, but I will say that if you have Forbidden Droplet, either in your main deck or your side deck, that you should run Droplet over this probably. Um, this is generically good. Like every deck can run this and it'll work. Droplet is situational. Droplet is a good card. Yes, obviously it's $100. This is like $5 for the common, like 15 or whatever for the secret. I don't know what the price is, but much cheaper than Droplet. Budget alternative to Droplet. Forbidden Droplet requires you to have a certain kind of deck, in my opinion. Like Forbidden Droplet is good when you want to send cards to the graveyard, right? If you're playing a control deck like Eldritch, Subterror, Dark Magician, I don't think Droplet is that good because you're sending cards to the graveyard to use its effect that maybe you can't afford to send, or like you're not getting any value out of those cards being in the graveyard. Like this doesn't have any cost. This just says you drop this down, negates all their monster effects, no cost, other than you can't damage them, you can't OTK them, and it doesn't cost you cards, like and they can't respond to it using monster effects. So yeah, so if you're a combo deck, you know, if you're still playing Drytron, Dragon Link, Forbidden Droplet might probably be better for you. If you're just playing any deck, like regardless of archetype, this card will always be good. So yeah, if you don't, so yeah, if you can afford to run Droplet, run it in place of this card. Like I don't think you need both; it's kind of overkill. But if you can't, or you know it's not optimal, just run this. Like when in doubt, run this in your side deck. 3 of these, right? And you'll have a good time. Going second, yeah, side these 2 in, you'll blow out their board. This card, obviously, if it doesn't blow out their board, it gets an Omni-Negate. Oh, they have Barone. You can at least force the negate, right? Obviously, you lose your battle phase, but whatever. Like the point here is to like break their board. And since these are like spell traps, like and not monsters, like they're gonna have fewer negates. Like if you had Apple, like again, because there's more monster negates in the game than spell trap negates. So that's another reason why hand traps can kind of be like weak or like not as good, is because it's very easy for them to put up a monster negate to stop your hand traps. It's a lot harder for them to put up omni negates to stop some of these, right? Funny thing is like if you have evenly and cosmic, evenly them first. Maybe they'll banish everything but one set card, and then you take out the set card with cosmic. This is a funny thing I've seen in the past. But yeah, cosmic. These are the 2 best backward removal. These 2 are the best in my opinion for dealing with front row right now. And then you know this will save you from scythe, right? Artifact scythe. Yeah, you don't want to get scythe locked. People don't like getting scythe locked. If you're playing Eldritch, that doesn't matter. But like if you're playing most other decks, you don't want to get scythe locked. So 3 of these, 3 of these, 3 of these. I think the quintessential 3 of hand trap for the side right now should be Token Collector. You can disagree with me. Maybe you prefer Nibiru, but I think like you know because we have the adventure stuff, we have Sword Souls still running around. They're not completely dead yet after the ban list, but you know, yeah, three token collectors in the side, in my opinion. And then the last 3 can be whatever you want. 3 Raigeki, 3 Nibiru, 3 Droll and Lockbird, whatever your heart desires, honestly. But you know, just make sure it's smart and makes sense in the context. Like maybe 3 Droll, maybe 3 DD Crow, like maybe 3 of these, like whatever. Like just be a little smart about it. Raigeki's at 3 now, by the way. If you like Raigeki, which I do, because Raigeki is just like, in my opinion, a better front like monster destruction than Lightning Storm. Yeah, run 3 Raigekis, like whatever. But yeah, but if you disagree with like my assessment of these cards, like feel free to comment. But like, yeah, these I think in the current format, these are like the best. Obviously, like 3 of each, right? For siding, and then like your last 3 slots, like depends on your deck and the form and like what you're seeing at your locals. Okay. Yeah. So hopefully y'all learned something. You know, maybe I brought a little bit more insight to like returning players or players who still scratch their heads about, oh, how can you possibly play modern Yu-Gi-Oh without like having a million hand traps in your main deck? Well, this is how. Like, just find other cards that do what that hand trap does, but better, right? This is typically like what I go for. I want cards that like you know a card like Skill Drain, like card like Ice Dragon's Prison, Torrential Tribute. I love Torrential Tribute, right? Like cards that just do way more than any hand trap available would, right? That's what I like to look for. Um, Okay. Well, thank you all for watching, and yeah, feel free to discuss in the comments. You know, I'm still learning the game. Like, there's still a lot. You know, maybe your experience at locals in the adventure format has been different than mine. You know, maybe things will change in the Battle of Chaos format, like Despia, like Branded is around the corner. So, you know, these will obviously change. But like, you know, for right now, I think this is a pretty good assessment of not just like the current situation, but like of just, you know, deck building and hand traps in general. So, all right. Um, thanks for watching, and peace.